I remember when I was a freshman at Harding in 2006, I legitimately spent most of my freshman year thinking I was like the only student who had been raped and
Mhm.
the only student who'd been sexually assaulted and like the only student who wasn't raised in a Christian household and the only student who all of these things. And
Yeah.
it was so spiritually crippling to me, to be quite honest. And I had like every expectation of coming to Harding and like, okay, I'm going to be surrounded by really great people who are not judgmental. And I had honestly never felt more judged in my life. And that was horrible. And there were
Yeah.
things just that I was honestly ignorant to because I wasn't raised in the church, and things that would be said. And, it's supposed to be like easy points, like listing the books of the Bible, supposed to be like buffer points in class. And I was like hardcore studying because I truly didn't know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were even called the Gospels. I didn't
Yeah.
know the gospel meant good news. I only knew 3 songs my whole freshman year in chapel and just little things, of assumed knowledge. And I realize I'm definitely not the majority in that regard, but I remember how much I could exhale when I realized that there were others.
Mhm.
And so, in addition to my class being an academic class, I also want it to sort of be a place where people can look around and see that they're not alone. So I want there to be class discussion. I want to tell them about myself. And I think, Satan has a lot of tools. I just imagine him being this entity with like this tool belt, and he has these tools. And I feel like his favorite ones are secrets, shame, and isolation. And when you feel isolated, 2020, we all sort of felt that a little bit, but
Yeah.
when you feel isolated in your struggles or in your story, that can be so spiritually damning. And when students can look around, that is their sort of first beacon of light. And where there is light, there cannot be darkness. And so that I love.
Mhm.
And then that sort of is like what starts the snowball of true healing.
Yeah. I'm taking notes and I've got written down here Satan's tool belt,
Mhm.
secrets, shame, and isolation. Let's talk about this for just a second. Secrets, shame, and isolation. Is transparency the way that we've been describing it? Is that the antidote or is that the beginning of breaking secret shame and isolation? Is that what you've seen in your experience in bringing spiritual healing to college students?
Yeah. And I think that's why I encourage it so much and try to model it so much to my students, my high school students, my college students, counseling students. I think that if we can actually speak it out loud, then it no longer can fester in our heart and our mind and our spirit. I
Mm.
feel like wholeheartedly we were created for a relationship. God Himself is a Trinity, like is a relationship in and of Himself as a
Mm.
being. God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And I think in relationship and in community, the way you build those relationships authentically is by being vulnerable. And in order to be vulnerable, you have to be transparent. We are not meant to navigate these hardships of life alone. And we are not meant to carry that shame. I feel like guilt can be a good motivator, but I feel like shame is different than guilt. I feel like shame is a spiritual weapon for sure. And when our students are able to speak it out loud and then for it to be caught in a safe place and for someone to say, you know what, I can relate to that, or I used to struggle with that too. Let me walk alongside you and show you how I overcame this mountain. There's so much power there. And so I do feel like it is the catalyst to begin the healing process and to begin the edification process of it becoming something that is spiritually horrible to then something that is spiritually empowering. Think of like, in Genesis, what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. All of these things and these struggles that I have had and these experiences that my students have had, they could just be horrible things. But, before the podcast, we were talking about how Philippians is my favorite book. And it is my favorite book because Paul, who himself was a murderer of Christians, then becomes a Christian. And not only that, he is then imprisoned because of it. And that's a lot of traumas, a lot of big T traumas. But then he pins Philippians, which talks more about joy than any book in the Bible. And he talks about how what has happened to him has happened for his deliverance and it will serve to advance the gospel. And to me, that's so powerful because once you are able to speak it out loud, it can then provide hope and encouragement to other people. And that is so redeeming because it isn't just this horrible thing that was evil in your life. It can actually be something that gives light and hope to others. And I feel like that's quite literally why we are here.